Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you, and I really think you're going to enjoy her. Her name is Dr. Ruth Mannschreck. She is a dentist, a business strategist, and the founder of Shoreline Strategies LLC. She has over 30 years of experience in private dental practice. And after a life-altering experience with her daughter's NICU stay, she reimagined her business, reducing her hours while boosting revenue. This shift inspired her to develop a streamlined business model centered on efficient systems, high-performing teams, and a thriving company culture. Now, through her transformative programs, Business Lifestyle by Design and Prep It to Sell, Dr. Ruth helps entrepreneurs build scalable businesses and unlock their full potential, ensuring they sell for maximum value when the time is right. And today, Ruth and I are going to talk about how to not work so many hours, right, Ruth? Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this
Yeah, I'm so
conversation.
excited to have you because none of us wants to work more hours. We all want to work less, right?
Exactly.
So
And
I
actually, it's
want
good for us to work less.
Exactly. Yeah, it absolutely is. So I always ask all my guests when we start the podcast to tell me their story, and I really want to hear more about your daughter's NICU and how that all came about.
Sure.
So could you please tell us all your story,
Sure.
how you got
And
started as a dentist and all of it?
yes, and because this story is about my daughter, she requested that if I use it all the time, which I do, that I tell everyone she's doing great. She got her master's. She survived. She's married and
Oh,
working
that's
full time.
amazing.
She's doing great.
She's a fully
Um,
fledged functioning adult, right?
Yes, and but it was a little touch and go. My husband and I had a full-time dental practice for 5 days a week, and we had two little boys. When my daughter was born, she had a very traumatic birth. She was in, like you said, she was in intensive care for almost 6 weeks.
Wow.
Um, and when she was home, when they let her come home, she had to see 8 different doctors every week.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I have a really great practice going. I couldn't just set it down and walk away. So
Right.
I sat down with my team and I said, we have to scrunch this down to 2.5 days. That's all I have to give to the practice. I said, we have to change everything we do. And we
Wow.
did. And I don't want people to think that I did this all myself. My team
Right.
and I worked together on this. We changed our business model. We changed my day schedule. We changed the people that worked in the practice. We changed our culture, the whole 9 yards. And it worked. It took us a little while, but it worked. And I didn't realize how cool it was until I was walking down the hall and the suite next door to mine was also another dentist. And he said to me, Ruth, what are you doing? He said, you're never here. And yet your team functions. They're in and out. You have patients coming in and out. He said, what is going on in there? And he actually became my first client
Oh, that's
because I
amazing.
taught him
Yeah, what you
what we
did.
did. And then
Wow.
and then I realized, wow, this could be a game changer. Even if you don't have to drastically change the size of your footprint in your office, if you just could cut a day off so that you could get your life back. So that's why we've begun, sharing this. We have 5 parts to our process to
Okay.
really have the doc back up from what they do and become a CEO of a practice, even if there's only one doc. So you provide your expertise and you lead your practice, your business, and somebody else does everything else.
Yeah, so you're practicing, your practice is running for you, not the other way around. You're not running for the practice. I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
amazing.
So we've come up with, like I said, 5 different areas that we ask owners to really look at in there. And the very first one is you need robust systems.
Okay.
We started with what I call the patient journey. You might call it the client journey, from the very first phone call when they call and you find out what's going on, to all the data input to scheduling an appointment and delivering services and all the way through on down to, in dentistry, we call it a recall system. You would use your booster data to keep in touch with them over time. But that whole process spelled out step by step as a system, and who is responsible for each system, what is the outcome of that system part supposed to be, and how do they communicate that to the next person in line, to the next, like you're handing off batons, how you do that handoff to the next person. That's
step.
all really figured out ahead of time. So everyone is doing it the same way. Everyone is singing the same song, so to speak.
Everyone's on board.
Right. And it makes it so easy to do cross training, because in many small practices, you have to know how to do more than one job.
Right.
So it just clarifies everything. And because it seems like a lot of structure to us creatives, because docs tend to be creatives, but it really does give you a framework, and you can allow your team members to be more creative because they have a structure to work within, if that makes sense.
So do these systems, you call them, do they come about from the team? Is this something you would sit down with your team and try to create, kind of like you did when you needed time?
We do.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I like that. I like the collaborative style.
It is. Your team members have a different perspective on your systems, whether it's the accounts payable or accounts receivable, whatever system you're focused on, their perspective of how it runs and how it works is really different than the docs. I mean, we do our best to, specify it. This is what I want the outcome to look like. But how you get there is different from their perspective, because they do it every day, all day long.
Right. Right. So being collaborative and kind of getting them on board, kind of like you had to when your daughter was sick, and yours was quick, right? You're like, all right, this week I'm working 5 days a week. Next week, only 2.
Next week, exactly.
So it had to be quick.
And I'm really happy that I was forced, so to speak, because I don't think I would have ever put that much intention into designing it,
Right. Right.
So I'm kind of happy that it went the way it did.
Sure.
And the outcome is so easy to share with other professionals in private practice,
Yeah. Okay. So you have your systems. Like, when you do the systems, do you outline the areas, or is that for the person to try to figure out in their own practice?
It is. It depends on the owner and the team. I've seen some practices try to write it all out, and no one wants to read this giant book. So what I'm noticing is a lot of practices are doing it with videos. So you could do Loom videos or BombBomb videos, and just have an archive of videos. So if a team member has a question, they can go in and watch a 2-minute video instead of flipping through 500 pages trying to find where it told them.
This is how we do this. This is how we get the clients in the room. This is how we present history, or take the history.
Exactly.
So it's kind of those steps. Okay, I love that.
And it allows you to have kind of a Q&A session at the end of each department in your, like if you have questions about what language do I ask to tell, Mrs. Jones that she's 60 days beyond her due date for payment, there can be an FAQ, frequently asked questions, just on those topics, so that people can go right to where they want to check things out without having to go to the office manager or the doc and say, okay, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like these systems are kind of like a living thing when you first start out, because they have to keep changing. When you run into problems, you can adjust them and kind of get, I love that.
And what you just said is perfect to get your team to really embrace the idea that this is not carved in stone. This is a flexible, fluid thing. Yes, the criteria, like we make parameters, we have to have parameters. You have to describe the result to your team.
Right.
But if you give them the freedom to get to that result however they want, and still keep Mrs. Jones happy, keep me happy, keep all the core values of the practice happy, that saves the doc from a lot of questions.
Right, it absolutely does. And sometimes it has to be fluid just because we're dealing with, well, veterinarians, we're dealing with people and animals, and that creates
Uh-huh.
a lot of variables, right? And then you've got the doctor who has a family that they're trying to, in a life,
Yeah,
that's another variable. Yeah, I love that.
right, right. So that's the first one.
Yep, they're the
The
systems. You
second
got it.
piece that we the second piece we look at, which is just as important to me, is communication.
Yeah, big one.
So we start with, so I'll give you an example from the dental world. Every morning we have what I call a stand-up huddle. So we spend 10 or 15 minutes. Everybody is standing up because I want it to be short. My team wants it to be short. And
Right,
we review today's schedule, make sure we've got all the lab work, all the labs results are back in, everything is ready to go. Then we look at tomorrow's. Oh, and we also talk about like, where are there holes in the schedule? Like
right.
we run it by the team and say, who could we put in these holes to fill up our schedule? Then we
Right.
look at the next day and say, how are we doing? Do we have the lab work for tomorrow? Do we have to call? What do we have to do to take care of tomorrow's?
Today to get ready for
That's
tomorrow.
right.
Okay.
So every day, and it can even be done if you have part-time people who only work like afternoons or mornings, there's a way to tweak it. But just so that everyone has a grounding point in the morning to set the tone, because it's also a time to say, I think I'm coming down with a head cold, so you might have to say things to me twice, kind of give your team
Right.
an
Yeah.
idea of how you are doing or how they're doing, you
Giving them
know.
the heads up. Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
so I don't want your listeners to think that communication means more meetings. I'm not a fan of meetings, but you do need some.
Right, right.
Um, so we try to have team meetings on a regular basis, maybe once every 2 weeks, once every month, to check in, because a big part of our practice is the culture.
Right.
And in order to maintain or sustain an amazing culture, you need to really, boy, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Do you have water?
I do. Excuse
Go ahead and take a drink. This is a relaxed podcast. We can drink, we can cough. It's fine. The dogs
Thank.
sometimes bark, so
Okay, thanks. Um, so we have team meetings, let's say once a month. And that's a time when we review our core values.
and
Boy,
the systems and all that.
yeah. Core values are actually the next piece of the 5 pieces.
Okay, so is that number 3 then?
Culture,
Core
right.
values?
The third is core values and culture. What
Gotcha.
we've found makes for a great culture is having your core values turned into behaviors. So usually when a practice puts together core values, they end up with 4 or 5 big words. They put on a plaque and they slap it on the wall, and no one ever thinks about it again.
Right.
But it looks good if your clients read it.
Sure.
That's not functional, really. What you need to help maintain a great culture are what I call a code of conduct. So it's taking your core values, turning them into behaviors that are identifiable. So you teach your team how to recognize your core values in action. So for example, I'm sure I know in our veterinary, we have 2 dogs. Our veterinarian, they're very compassionate. That is one of their core values. And you
Right.
can see compassion in many of the actions, whether it's a front desk person, whether it's a tech, whether it's a doctor. They all have recognizable behaviors that we know as a client, I know they're doing this because of their compassion. Okay, so that's how you define your culture. And you have to define it so that it makes the doc whole, makes you complete, because it's your practice. You want it to emanate your core values. It has
Right.
to be such that your team members identify, they embrace it, they agree while they're in your practice, they will, live out these core values. And it
Right.
has to matter to your clients. Your clients you want them to appreciate how your core value behaviors shape the culture. That's very winsome, very attractive to
Yeah. it keeps them coming back, right?
It
I know at my
does.
dentist, I wouldn't go there if I didn't trust him because I'm always like,
Right.
"Ugh." Every time he tells me I need dental work, I'm like, no, I'm not. And then he has to convince me, right? Because I don't like dental work.
See, and I think the world of dentistry and veterinary care is so similar.
They're
People
similar.
are
Yeah,
people are terrified to come to the dentist,
sure.
and
Yep.
they don't want to hear what I have to say. But on the same vein, people are very apprehensive when it comes to who handles their dogs or their
Sure.
animals,
Yeah,
So I see our cultures have to communicate very similar
absolutely.
things to our clients,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
you're absolutely
That's
right.
that's a very big piece of the 5 pieces that go together to create something that will get along without you, you
So
know?
how do you describe those actions to your team? Like, let's say we talk about our core values, we know what they are, we're pretty solid on that. How do you teach them to emulate those core values in their actions? Like, is there a way that you can communicate that to them so
Yeah.
they know what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
So we have, because this is part of our team meetings that we have,
Right.
and we pick a core value each team meeting, and we say, okay, so let's talk about what are behaviors that would teach our clients about our core value of compassion, say.
Okay.
And then we have an ongoing game in our practice where we want our team members to catch each other doing the core
Ooh,
value behavior.
I love that. Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
in fact, part of our bonus system is based on how many times can we catch you um, living out our core values
Like
in
demonstrating a core value.
yes,
I love that.
yes. And it's not just the doc saying, "Oh, I like you, you do a good job, you get a bonus."
Right.
These are team members catching each other, and we talk about. So I saw Jane talk to Mrs. Smith about her bill that she couldn't pay, blah blah blah. But they catch each other, so it gets them engaged in, first of all, deciding what does that behavior look like, and
Right.
then supporting their team members so that it really does bring the team together, so they feel more like a team, more like a
Right.
family, that they belong.
Right. And the other thing I like about that you do is that I talk a lot about training your brain to see the positives. And
Yeah,
so you're training your team to look for positives that
exactly.
their teammates are
Mm-hmm.
demonstrating rather than looking for the things they're not doing correct. Like because you're
So,
asking them to look for the core values. I love that.
so now that we've talked about this, go back to what I was referring to in the morning huddle.
Yes.
When we say, so Mrs. Jones is coming in today and she's very apprehensive, like she has to be medicated before she comes in. So so the team ask each other, what are some things I can do? Give me suggestions of how I can ease Mrs. Jones's fear while
Yeah.
she's here. And the team talks about what behaviors that we do should we really make sure we do in front of her so
Yeah.
that she has less of an apprehensive experience while she's in our office. So it's
Yeah.
because we have this ongoing conversation about behavior and our culture. It's so easy to bring it right into our meeting every morning and say, now, what would help Mrs. Jones? Or how am I going to get Mr. Smith to stop being so angry about
Right.
whatever, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think that would be really fun too in a veterinary hospital to just be aware of who's coming in. Because sometimes if, the real high maintenance client comes in and you don't know it and they just show up, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for him today. How am I going to be
Yes.
patient? But if you
Yeah.
knew ahead of time that person was coming, you might be able to think
Hmm.
it through a little bit better. So I love the huddle idea.
Yeah.
Love it.
The huddle actually started because one of the things my team said to me when we did this initially was, Dr. Ruth, unless you need your dental handpiece or your dental license to do it, you're not allowed to do anything.
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's
Right.
how clear cut we had to get about what I was and wasn't allowed to do,
Right.
strictly based on time commitment,
Right.
and
If
it
you
and
were
it made
only going to
it,
be there 2.5 days, you had to be
yeah,
working on teeth every second in order to get
right,
the practice to run the way you wanted it to run. I love that.
right. Or working up care plans or there are things that, that reading x-rays and
Right. You
referral
have to
partners,
do. Right.
But it really made it crystal clear, what do we have to teach our team to do? And
Right.
that probably leads into another piece of our 5-point little process is we had to hire different people. We had to hire people specifically to excel in the areas that we needed them within our business. So we went after what I call the Henry Ford model for business. Henry
Yeah,
Ford.
like the assembly line kind of thing.
Well, actually, Henry Ford never graduated from high school. He never finished high school. And yet he built this empire. And
Right.
his technique was he knew mechanics. So he focused only on the mechanic part. And he surrounded himself with experts in all the other aspects of running a business, like operations and sales and marketing and
Right.
service delivery. All those areas, he just had somebody else that was an expert. Now, in private practice, we can't always afford to hire an expert.
Right.
So we like to call them champions, someone who is just way better at doing whatever the task is than the doc is, you know?
Right. Right.
Because nowadays for marketing, you could hire a high school kid to do all your social media.
Yeah, and they'd be better than I would,
They'd be
right?
way better than us, you know?
Yeah.
So it's the idea is still to have someone really excellent at what they do, which means you have to understand the skill sets of your employees, and you have to understand the skills required to do all the different. So you're assigning job tasks based on abilities and skills, not just, well, Mary has time to make these collection phone calls, so she'll do
Right.
that,
Right. I need
which is
somebody that's
how a
really
lot of
good
it.
at it. Yeah.
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 I like that. It's I think John Maxwell says that you hire your weaknesses. So you hire people that can kind of fill your gaps on the things
Yes.
you don't do well
Yes.
or the things
Yep.
that you don't have time to do in your case. Like I don't have
Mm-hmm.
time for that. I just got to do teeth
Right.
and treatment
Right.
plans. Yeah.
And the
Yep.
goal is in a regular office is just by the time you get done with everyone's job description, not just the doc, but
Right.
if you focus on just their level, their area of expertise, and you take away as much of the other, like paperwork and bookkeeping, all the things
Right.
that I as a doc don't thrive on.
Don't need to do.
Yes. So find someone who absolutely loves doing bookkeeping in a
Sure.
dental practice,
Right.
or someone who understands dental insurance. So all those areas to think of someone, not just because they have time to do it, but because they have the skill or the desire to do a good
Yeah,
job
the
at it.
passion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody that really loves that. That's great. Okay. So is that number 4, hiring champions?
It is. You're
Because I'm
putting
writing it down.
together.
I'm writing
Yep.
down the steps because that's
Yes.
what I
No, no,
do.
no. This is good. You're putting together a high performing team, you
Yeah.
know? So, and part of that is what I call retention of these high performing people, because you can't bring brilliant talent into a practice that's not going to support them academically,
Right.
help them get where they want
Yeah.
to go in their
They're not going to
business,
stay. Yeah.
support them emotionally, make it a winsome, irresistible place to work because of your culture and the people that they work with.
Right.
So it's almost like no plain Janes in your practice. No
All
people who,
tens, right?
huh?
All tens.
Yes,
You
or
just want a hospital full of tens.
and think about it. Sometimes it's easier to hire a person who to just hire someone because they have the skill set that you want. And part of hiring the right people is hiring people who have the right mindset and the right
Hmm.
attitude to go
Yeah.
with it. So it's
Yeah.
being a little bit pickier about who you let in the door. I love that saying. They say, hire slow and fire fast.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not always easy to do, but it really is true. Like everybody I ever fired, I wish I'd have done it sooner.
yes,
I'm like, oh,
yes,
I should have done that 6 months ago, or I should have done that, 3 weeks ago, or whatever. Once you do it, you're like happy you did it.
yes.
Yeah.
But we all professionals in private practice, we have a hard time finding the right people. So
Sure.
when we find someone with a great skill set, we're very reticent to let them go unless they, yell at a customer or something. You
Right.
just make excuses for them for the longest time because we all have this insecurity,
You
this
can fix them.
fear.
I always thought I could help everyone and coach them. I can coach them and they'll be better. And it doesn't always
Yes.
work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last piece of it is actually the leadership. When I was seeing my team 5 days a week, leadership was a whole different thing to me. And I'm really old, so I was back in the time of leadership.
Back in the olden days when we practiced.
It was I'm the leader because I know stuff,
Right.
and you will do as I say. I'll tell you what to do, and you do
And you just
exactly what
do
I
it.
say, and
Yeah.
it'll turn out just perfect.
Right.
Well, all my kids are millennials, and they don't want any part of that thought process at
Right.
all. And I don't
Right.
blame them,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
different.
now it's a whole different leadership today is more about defining what your end result is, like give them a picture, paint a picture
Give
of
them a
what you,
goal to shoot
right.
it, right?
And then say, now, how would you get there? How would you do this? Which in our professions is very scary. Somebody could die in my office if I didn't paint a perfect picture that I want
Right.
them to,
With all the steps, right? Like,
exactly,
yeah.
you know,
So it's scary to let go of a little bit of that control.
but that is so important to these kids.
Mhm.
It's so important. And just to tell you, they'll realize that, yes, my way was the best way to do it. But because I let them get there on their own, it means to them, they're valued as a person.
Sure.
They're valued as a brain. Like, I appreciate that they are smart and can figure things out. So it's not that we don't have a handbook and how to do things. But there are in a practice, there are so many instances where you just have to make snap decisions and go. And if you
Right.
give them the responsibility and the privilege of doing that on their own, it's a great learning experience. Because if they mess up, they're only going to do it once,
Right. Right.
But it's a whole different, you're valuing them as a whole person, not just because they follow instructions.
Right. Well, and if they have that feeling that you trust them and you want them to make decisions and that you will back them up even when they do make a mistake, that's going to grow your whole practice. Because if you
Mhm.
keep people like on a leash and they can only do things, your way or the highway, they're not going to want to grow and develop and learn. But
Mhm.
if you allow them to make decisions and contribute, and I don't know, I'm really all about servant leadership and collaborative leadership because I think
Yeah.
it really grows people. And some of these people will pass you up. I had people in my practice that were just like flying, and I'm like, oh shoot, I grew them so much that they need to go to a different job because they're so good now.
But
But
that's such a
but in a way, that's
compliment.
what you want, right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
in fact, that's what we aim for. We're like, I am this part of your journey. I'm your leader for this part of your journey. How can I help you be equipped for the next step in your life?
Right.
So having a conversation about, I realize you won't be a permanent fixture in my practice, and it's okay.
Right.
What
Yeah.
what can I do while you're here to support you on your way to somewhere else? When you stop thinking that the best result is always that they stay forever,
Right.
it just gives you so much more freedom to have great conversations with people. So when for the time they are in your practice, you've got their heart and soul working for you because they know you're going to let them go when they get to that part where they need to move on to something else. And not
And you're going to
everybody.
help them get there, right?
Yes,
If you have dreams for them, if you support their dreams and help them get to their dreams, then they're going to give you so much back in return while they're working for you.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
you're gonna have a better employee for the time that they are with you, you know?
Sure. Absolutely.
For me, it was a mindset shift from, oh no, I might have to hire again. Now my mindset is I'm always going to be hiring. I'm always going to be looking for the right personality to work in my practice.
Right.
And that was a huge shift for me. And I was no longer, oh, what if they leave? I mean, I just remember one day saying, no, you can't leave me. There was
Yeah.
so bad.
I don't have
Um,
time to hire someone else.
I
It's too
don't,
much work. Yeah, I hear you.
so changing that whole mind shift of I'm just going to be looking for the right people all the time, and we built a corral of people who we as a team thought would have the right personality, the right communication skills, all the things that you can't really teach people. I mean, you can't teach people to be nice or to be polite, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can't teach them to care about your
Right.
practice. They have to care. And I think by offering them support and room for growth and collaboration and input, that you are basically giving them what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And they'll stay longer. I mean, they really
Hmm.
will because you're allowing them to participate rather than
Right.
just come into work and do a job.
Hmm. So
Yeah,
it also meant, because I can hear some of the docs in my head when you say, oh, you just have to hire all the time, and they think, I don't have time to be
correct.
hiring people
Right. You
all the
can't do
time.
that 2.5 days a week, right?
I know. So what happens is you bring your team into the hiring process
Yeah.
so that the team, and you can make it a long, drawn out process as long as you're not doing it. So
Right.
the team has initial interviews. The team takes them out for lunch. We do a lot of role playing in our practice. And we bring the candidates that are applying for a job right into, well, for example, if we need a chairside assistant, they come in and they assist me chairside, because I want them to know a lot of your job is going to be holding the suction thing in their mouth
Right.
for 20 minutes at a time. Do you know what I mean? It's
Sure.
just not
Yeah.
glamorous,
Right.
these things you're going to do. So we want them to know that before, because many times, they don't know what they're getting into until they're already in the
They
practice.
have no idea what we do behind the scenes, right?
Yeah,
How it isn't always glamorous.
right. So we have our team take them out for lunch, to a place, not to McDonald's, but to a restaurant that might have table cloths and napkins,
Yeah.
and
So they can
see
sit with
how do they behave? Can they carry on a conversation? Are they at ease with the rest of the team? How do they treat the wait staff? You just get spending time getting a 360 so impression of people is a much better way to make decisions about someone you might be stuck with for a while if you don't
right.
do a good job. And we have a get to know us time in our practice anyway. Some of my clients have, like, you're going to be a 1099 contractor for the first 60 days, and then
Okay.
if we all like each other, it's like being engaged. If we all like each other, then we'll get married and you can
Okay.
become an employee. But it's just to have like 60 days, 90 days,
Right.
just to get to know, because people don't understand what goes on in a veterinary office. They have no idea what goes on when you shut the door and take
Right.
their animal into the back. They have no
Yeah.
clue what happens
No.
back there. So it gives them time to say, yep, I'm good with what we do. I'm good with how it smells. I'm good with all the sounds. And then if it doesn't work, both sides can set it down and say, no harm, no foul. We tried. And
Right.
thank you for playing. But it's a nice opportunity to step away should either side have questions,
Right.
about whether it's going to work or not.
Right. So tell me well, I don't want to stop you from this. Are we through all the steps?
Yes, I think we hit all the
Okay,
steps.
so I'm going to read them again. Systems, communication, that's like your huddle and your culture. The third one is core values and culture,
Right,
right?
right.
The fourth one is hiring champions.
Mm-hmm.
And the fifth one is leadership.
Right.
Am I right? Okay,
Yep.
cool. Like I like
Uh,
to have all these little formulas because I
No,
think
it's
people that are
perfect.
listening, everybody comes up with these little, formulas and you can read books and everyone
Hmm.
has their own idea. But I think every time you listen to something like this, it sparks something. Like you talking about the huddles in the morning, I'm like, oh, I should have done that more often. So next time I go into a hospital, that's what I'm going to do. But I really think that, just kind of hearing you describe how you did this. So my question was going to be, tell me about when you first started this, when you had two little boys and a daughter that was high risk medical. How did you handle it mentally and emotionally while you were trying to get your practice pared down to 2.5 days a week? Does that make sense? Is that a question?
Absolutely, absolutely. My team and I and my husband, to be totally honest, we just made we just made an agreement that it was okay to make mistakes because we had to take bold strokes. We had to do big changes. We
Right,
couldn't
this had to
like,
happen fast.
yes, couldn't inch our way into it, which is more gracious, but
Right.
it had to happen now. So we gave each other permission to make mistakes. And I think the most valuable thing that I learned is that I wish in my whole practice time, the whole length of time was a dentist, that I was more accepting of my failures. As a
Yeah,
dentist, I'm trained to be a perfectionist,
yeah,
and
yeah,
even when I'm perfect, it doesn't always work.
sure.
So, so I was not readily going to admit that to failures, but boy, during this process of we're going to try this, we're allowed to make mistakes, and we learned so much. I wish that I had begun embracing failure um, sooner, and like they say, fail fast to get to the top.
Yeah,
I should have been failing way faster, but in my mind, in my perfectionist dentist mind, that was a bad thing. That was a
yeah. So you
I
fought the
shouldn't
process a
admit.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, which we all do. Veterinarians are very, very similar to dentists in that we have a
Hmm.
tendency to be highly perfectionistic, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And we do harm ourselves because of that. Like we kind of ruminate on the failures, beat ourselves up, get
Uh-huh.
frustrated when something doesn't go the way it should, and even if it's not our fault.
You
And
had a
that's something that I'm trying to change with what I'm doing is just, knowing that we're all
mhm.
human and that things aren't always going to go well, and that's okay.
You had a wonderful episode about compassion fatigue.
Oh,
And
okay.
and boy, that rang true. We have what I call micro failures because it's the human body. We put all this metal in there, we put porcelain, we put all this stuff in there, and
Yep.
then we wonder why it doesn't last forever. We're getting much better at it. We're
Right.
pretty good at it, but it just when you see failure even micro failures on a daily
Yeah.
basis, could be somebody else's failures, could be mine.
Yeah.
But and it builds up in here, and then
Right.
add unhappy or reticent patients.
Yeah, and that's going to happen, right? Not
It
not
is.
necessarily from the work we do, but something with them sometimes. It isn't even our fault. It's they're just unhappy in general for some other
Oh,
reason,
absolutely.
and we take it personally.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Or people that hate the
Yeah, we
dentist,
do.
that hate the vet.
They do, and you see someone sit in the white knuckle, if you look at their hands on the chair, you can see that they're gripping it like it's the lifeboat.
Right.
Um, and one of those or two of those is fine, but when you have a day full of that, it just wears on you.
Yeah, you can feel the
Um,
energy, right?
yes,
The negative energy.
and yeah, it is. It's just different. So I love the idea of docs, even with a wonderful practice that's going great, they tend to work too many hours and they tend to not focus on self-care.
Yeah.
I constantly have to remind my doc clients that you are the goose that laid a golden egg. And as your mental state goes, so goes the practice, you know?
Mm, true.
So, so even if you don't need 2 extra days in your week, you do need time to care for yourself. And I
Right.
don't always think that has to happen on the weekends or in the evening. I think
Right.
it's perfectly fine to take days, and go care for yourself, care for your family and those relationships, because you need to be a well-rounded person running a practice, caring for your patients, and your clients,
Right.
So I think this is looking at really how you run your practice, or if you are working too many hours or just too busy, it does have an effect on your mindset, and you really should care for yourself.
Right.
And you are actually serving your employees when you do that, because you'll be a happier, healthier doc for them to
Right.
deal with when you're in the
Yeah.
office.
Well, and I imagine that you can offer this thought, and I'm putting it in your mouth, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. But when you had two young children, two boys, and then you had this girl that needed a lot of care, and you were there for her, and you rearranged your practice so you could be there for your daughter, and now your daughter's grown, you probably don't regret any of those days not being at the practice.
Not at all. In fact, when she was a little bit older, we didn't have to do that. We never went back to 5 days a week. We have always practiced. Up until I sold my first practice, we always practiced 2.5 days. We
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah,
It
I
was
bet.
just wonderful. When you told new candidates for employment, that we only work 2.5 days, and they might get maybe they'd work 3,
Right.
doing lab work,
Yeah.
they were ecstatic. Like you
Sure.
couldn't, yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, so
Um,
it can be done.
yes, and it's with the right mindset and the right culture to go with it. It's very, very healthy to do, you
Yeah.
know?
And then when those kids grow up, you're like, well, I'm really glad I spent time with those kids.
Yes,
Yeah, because we can
yes.
say that because our kids are grown now. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have young children, believe me, if you spend more time with your kids and less
Yeah.
time at work, you're going to be happy that you did it.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
you can always work full time when they go off to college if you want, right?
Yeah. And there are, think of dropping kids off at school, those, or picking them up in the afternoon. Those are the best conversations. And if you miss them, you miss them. There's
Yeah.
just no getting those conversations back with your children.
When my son was in elementary school, I coached his Lego robotics team
How
because
cool.
he wanted to do it so badly, and the teachers that were running the program quit and they had no coach, and I was like, well, I guess I could do that. Well, so I used to
Mm.
leave work, go to the school, pick up all these little boys, or do it in the
Right.
school or bring them to my house so they could practice with these Legos. And, it was a hassle when I was doing it, and I really had to work my butt off to figure out how to robotics because I
Yeah.
had no experience with that. But it's a great memory. And my son is
Yeah.
like, Mom, I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, well, you really wanted to do it, and I didn't want to break your little heart. So I had to figure out how to be a robotics coach, which was crazy. But I don't
But
remember.
look what you role modeled for
Well,
your
and I don't
son.
remember the patients that I left behind when I left early to pick these boys up, and I don't remember the clients getting upset, which I'm sure some of them
Yeah.
did on the days that I left early. But I do remember being with these boys and going to the
Hmm.
competitions and that, that excitement that they showed when we actually, won a competition. And
Yeah.
so I really do always encourage veterinarians to like put that kind of stuff first
Hmm.
because as your career goes by, you'll have plenty of pets to see and plenty
Yeah.
of clients to see, but you don't
Yep.
always get to be with those kids.
Right.
You
Exactly.
miss on so much, it goes by so fast.
Well said.
So tell me, what I have not asked you that I should have. Is there something that we've missed in this discussion? Because I like the fact that you're into selling businesses too, so we can come back and do another hour on that one day, if people are interested in that. But
Yes.
what have we not said in this discussion?
So the only thing, some docs love to read books. So I have a couple
Okay,
unusual books that I would
I love that.
suggest,
Yep,
for just a different take on, um, the spot of being the CEO of your business. The
yep.
first is called Unreasonable Hospitality, the remarkable power of giving people more than they expect. It's actually a book written for the restaurant industry, hospitality industry, but oh man, they can teach us so much. It's a great book and a very fast read.
Service industry.
Yep.
Okay.
And the other book I would suggest is called The War of Art.
The War of Art. I haven't heard of that one.
I know. See, we usually think The Art of War, which is that old Chinese thing. This is
but they flipped it around.
Yeah. So it's actually written by Steve Stevens, who's the horror. He wrote it. It's a book about how to write a book.
Oh,
so it's the discipline.
That guy.
It's the discipline of writing a book is actually a lot more work. It sounds so romantic to like sit, in a coffee shop and write a book.
Yeah.
It's actually a very tedious task to write a book.
Oh yeah, right.
And the way this author, I'm sorry, I had the wrong author. It's Stephen Pressfield is the one that wrote.
Pressfield.
Yeah. Okay. The War of Art.
Okay. I love it.
We aren't the only ones that struggle with discipline or motivation,
Oh, I know. That's why I love getting life coached, because they always kick me in the butt and get me doing stuff. So
I know. We all could have a coach.
This. I'm like, everybody needs a coach, right?
They do. I have a coach.
So
everybody
is there
should
another
have a coach.
book or just those two?
Just those two. That's a great place to start.
I wrote them down. All right. And then can you tell people where to find you if they want to learn more about you, or if you have things on your website that will help them run their practices better?
Our website is shorelinestrategies.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. But I think for your listeners, we put together a resource for them if they go to workfewerhours.com.
Oh, I love that. Okay, workfewerhours.com.
Right. There's some resource.
There's something there that they can get.
Right. That's free.
Well, that's probably going to be the title for this episode, is how to work fewer hours.
Yeah.
With Dr. Ruth Mannschreck.
Very good. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Anything else that we haven't said?
I'm good. This was great.
Well, it was super fun talking to you. It went by really fast, and I love all the things that you're saying, and I have a million other questions. So we'll definitely have to do this again if you have time.
Oh, yes. That would be very fun.
Next time we'll talk more about getting your culture right so you can sell.
Sure.
That's probably part of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Getting it running efficiently and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's a big part of it.
All right. So everybody, this is Dr. Ruth Mannschreck, and I really appreciate you being here. It was really fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye.